Hello everyone! How's it going on this wonderful Saturday? Just finishing getting set up here, so thank you if you are one of the people who is actually here right on time. If you're watching the archive, you can always go ahead and skip, 5 minutes or so once everything is set up. Some of you may have tuned into my earlier live stream this week. I had to cut it off short, so I wanted to sort of make it up today and kind of do that stream again, basically, and go from there. Though I have to say, it's Saturday. It's a much noisier day in my apartment building, so hopefully we won't get too much neighbor noise and things like that, but that is always possible on a Saturday afternoon. So hi everyone, please don't be shy. Feel free to say hi in the chat. I'll be, as usual, taking questions, stuff like that. I am getting my second computer ready so that I'll be able to see the chat close to me, but it is a very slow computer, so I'm still getting that set up. Let's see here. Ooh, cello suite number 4 on a Spalla, that's awesome. Was that on YouTube? I think I've seen that video. And the 4th cello suite is my favorite. All right, so that is looking good. Gonna check a couple more things. Hopefully get the chat over here soon. All right. Hey Kevin, thank you guys all for being here and being so prompt. A 19th century bow for $13. I am very curious what kind of bow that is, but hey, it's not a huge loss if it ends up not being great. You might as well take the chance. Hey Steven, how's it going? So how are you guys? If some of you were here for my stream earlier this week, feel free to follow up on anything that we talked about in that stream since it got kind of cut off. If you're just tuning in for the first time today, great. We'll just kind of start from scratch. So let's see, what are we going to do today? I'm definitely going to be talking about if people have any questions about my new Collaborator program that I recently announced. For those who don't know about the Collaborator program, basically my channel is all about Baroque music, early music, and Baroque cello, which is what I play. So a huge amount of the videos on my channel are Baroque-specific repertoire for the cello, either unaccompanied repertoire that I play by myself, or sonatas with continuo where I record both parts and accompany myself. So that's the bulk of my channel, plus some instructional videos on historical performance practice. Plus there's a couple things on career building and stuff like that, being a musician in the professional world. So, guys, let me know how it's sounding. If anything sounds weird or strange or too quiet. Is it too quiet? Feel free to tell me while I'm just kind of talking and getting set up so that I have everything good. I think it might be too quiet. You guys can let me know. Let's see how this sounds. I just turned myself up a little bit. Okay. Thanks for stopping by, Kevin. Hey, Andy, how's it going? Let's see. Is this better? Volume better now? Just let me know, guys. I can tweak stuff while I'm still getting set up. So, okay, I made myself even louder. So hopefully that'll be fine. And once I actually start playing cello, I'm going to turn it down a little bit just because the cello is going to be louder than my voice. What was I saying? Collaborator program. So I've been doing a ton of videos. I've been putting out videos practically every week or, 3 to 4 times a month. My schedule is a little irregular, so I haven't gotten them out at the same time every week. But 3 to 4 videos a month for basically the last 2 years. And I've been able to be that consistent with the channel because of my patrons on Patreon. If you guys don't know about Patreon, if you're used to my channel, you must know about it. I mention it in every video. It's a crowdfunding site where people tip me for each video that I make. So because of my support on Patreon, I've been able to really put videos out regularly, and it's actually been able to be a nice part of my living. So because of that, I've put out a ton of videos over the last 2 years. I think I've got like practically 250 videos. So that has been awesome. It's really built my channel and made it grow. But it's now very heavy on, I've already done a lot of the solo cello repertoire, Bach cello suites, everything else. So I really wanted to start expanding the channel to include more things related to Baroque music, early music, historical performance, classical music topics in general. I just want more of that on my channel, and I know that if I open this platform to other musicians, it'll be, just so much easier to really expand what I offer. So the Collaborator program is basically my kind of call for submissions to my channel. So if you're interested, if you feel like this suits you or this kind of repertoire topic is something that you can do as a musician, definitely check that out. I think I put the link. Oh, maybe I didn't. Let me fix that. I'm gonna put the link for the Collaborator program I shouldn't have done it on the slow computer, in the description of the video, but I did do a video about the Collaborator program recently. Yeah, this was not a good idea to do it on this slow computer, so let me come over here and do it. The link is pretty simple. It's my website, emilyplayscello.com/collaborators. So it's a pretty easy link, but I'm still going to throw it in the description of the video for you guys to click on if you're interested in applying. So it is an application process. I mean, it's a pretty simple application, but it's just checking which repertoire you do, what you play, what your musical background is. And for right now, what I'm looking for is videos that are already filmed or in the process of being filmed. I'm not doing collaborations that would require me to do any filming right now because I'm still filming my own videos. So that's kind of what I'm looking for there, is videos like if you have like an audition tape of yourself where you sound really good and you want to share that, something like that, a video that's already done. So, putting in the link. And if you want to learn a lot more about the Collaborator program, like I said, I did post a video about that on my channel. It's probably my last video, I would think. Collaborators. So in order to see this link live in the description, if you are watching live, you may need to refresh the page, but there should be the link there now if you're interested. So that was a lot of talk on that topic, but I wanted to talk about it because that's kind of like my new thing on my channel right now. So let me get back to you guys. You guys all surviving winter wherever you live. This is my first winter living in Los Angeles, and I just cannot complain. It's so wonderful. I haven't been cold once, or, the cold is very different than the cold I was used to, so really loving it. Okay. All right, you guys are talking a lot. Great. Okay, hopefully it's not still distorting. If it is distorting, I frankly have no idea why, unless it's just turned up too loud now. All right, guys, just getting caught up on everything. JamWow, I do think because what you're talking about is period instruments, that could be an interesting collab to do early American music on historical instruments. I'm definitely open to that. So I am going to be getting back to you about your submission and to everybody who's submitted. Probably sometime within next week, I'll be able to respond to everybody that's applied so far. Okay. All right, guys, sounds like everything is going good. Now we're all stabilized here. Okay, so what was I going to talk about? I talked about the Collaborator program, so that was really my first order of business. So maybe I'll just get into some playing. If you guys have questions and things come up, I'll be checking the chat as I stop. If you're enjoying the stream, be sure to give it a thumbs up on YouTube. And I already mentioned Patreon, which is going to be supporting this live stream, but also, as you can see, They're really large. Link at the bottom there. The GoFundMe is just if you want to, the Patreon funding is recurring. It's for every time I make a video, but the GoFundMe is just for one-time donation. So if you just want to give me a little tip and say you liked the stream, you can do that over at the GoFundMe. And I'm going to try to keep an eye on that so I can shout out whoever gives a donation there. Okay. So as always, when I do these streams, I have not played yet today, so I always like to start with warming up, which I always do on scales. So I'll get going with that in a second. I'm going to turn the mic down just a bit for the cello, and again, guys, let me know if things are sounding weird. All right. Could probably use some rosin. Here we go. If you guys are curious about any of my equipment stuff, I do have an Amazon shop with some of my favorite cello related items. The link for that is also in the description of the video. My favorite rosin, which is Kaplan Dark Rosin. And this little chord tuner that you're going to see me using soon. It doesn't have specific temperaments, but you can tune the note by scent, so I'm able to change the A from a 440 to a 415, and then go through and it gives me drones on every pitch, which is really nice. Also a volume control, so I really like this little box as a tuner. It's also a metronome. Okay, let's see, maybe I'll move the camera down a little bit. Cello angle. Oh man, I already got a thumbs down. Person thumbs downing me, feel free to voice your complaints out loud as long as you use civil language. How's the cello volume, by the way? Does the sound okay? Let me know if I should turn it down. Okay guys, so if you don't already know, I'm playing on a Baroque cello, so I do not have an end pin. It's just called a button down there. I'm cradling the instrument with my legs. I'm playing on gut strings, which have a different sound and timbre than steel strings. You can see my fingerboard is shorter. Regular cello fingerboard would be probably about down there. My bridge is a different shape. I do not have fine tuners on my tailpiece, which is why I was tuning with the pegs. And then my Baroque bow has a lighter tip, you can see it's a little pointier, and a different curvature of the stick, and it's held a little bit further from the frock. So the equipment's a little bit different than a modern cello, and if you are curious to learn more about the older instruments, my channel is a great resource. Go to the instructional videos playlist because there is everything you would want to know about Baroque instruments there. Okay, Yes, I love the half step down tuning, the A415 instead of 440, which is a half step below normal A. It makes the instrument much more resonant also because the strings are not as tense because they're tuned looser. So I just love the sound of 415 also. Gut strings don't take more pressure, so to speak, but they take a different variation of speed and pressure. So when you go to play on a gut string, you have to do a little bit more of a bow stroke that goes into the string rather than straight across. If you try to whip your bow straight across the way you could on like a steel A string, you'll get those kind of whistling, squawky, squeaky sounds that gut strings are kind of known for, but not in the best way. Kind of like that. So you'll notice bow speed tends to be a lot slower on gut strings because it just needs a little bit more to grab into the gut core. Thanks, JamWow. Alright guys, so I'm going to do a scale. That's always how I start, just kind of an easy bow stroke, get the feelings. This is a real live warm-up, not a performance, so you'll get let into my warm-up world. So that is what I call the long, short bow stroke. It's really great for finger mobility on the bow hand, because you'll probably notice if you've watched a lot of my videos and see me playing, I use a lot of finger motion on the bow. I also play pinky on top, which is more like a violin bow hold, but back in the 17th and 18th centuries, the bow hold for overhand bowed instruments, violin family instruments, was kind of the same across all instruments. So the pinky on top gives us a nice counterbalance, and it's easier with a light tip to be able to balance the other end of the bow with the pinky like that. So what I like about the long, short bow stroke as a warm-up is the short notes give me an opportunity to get my finger motion going. You can see how I'm kind of initiating those smaller notes from the fingers, as opposed to an arm stroke. I heard a rattle up here. An arm stroke would be more like this. And I'm sure you can hear, or maybe you can't through the quality of the stream, but you can hear it really does not sound as good if we try to do those smaller, more detailed notes with the arm as opposed to with some finger mobility. Okay. Let's see, what else? I'm going to do a couple more warm-ups and then I'll get into some repertoire. So I could afford to do another scale. Let's do a flat scale. I'm going to do E flat major, and I'm going to keep it on the long short right now because that's what feels good to me at the moment for warming up. long, short, short. Question, do you only have one bow? As a historical musician, I'm kind of obligated to buy bows correct to the music I'm playing, a Mozart bow for Mozart, etc. So yes, if you are in the historical performance world, especially for violinists, maybe violists too, I don't see it as much for cellists, but it is still a factor, that this generic Baroque bow is kind of an 18th century model, works great in general for Baroque music, but if you're playing on period instruments for things that are a bit later, like early classical or even into classical, maybe even early romantic music on period instruments, bows evolved. We didn't just go from the Baroque bow to the modern bow we know today. There was what was called a transitional bow, which starts to go in the direction of a modern bow, but still has some qualities of the Baroque bow. Then there's a true classical bow, which is sort of like a lighter modern bow, and then we have the modern bow. So for me, I only have this Baroque bow. I use it for pretty much everything, but I have done, especially when I had my string quartet, emergence quartet that I had back in Boston, we did some programs that did some classical repertoire as late as early Beethoven actually, and we did some Mozart as well. So for those programs, I borrowed a classical bow. I've used my modern bow, but actually held it further from the frog as sort of like a hybrid. So it can be useful to have those extra bows, especially if you're getting hired a lot and maybe you're playing in an orchestra that's playing a Mozart symphony and wants everybody to use transitional bows or classical bows. It's nice to have the collection. I don't. I make it work with just a Baroque bow and a modern bow, but lots of people do have more. And there are even earlier 17th century bows. We call them short bows often because they are shorter than these 18th century models. And that would be a fun thing to have too, because I love 17th century repertoire. But yes, it adds up, it gets expensive. So what a lot of musicians that I know do is they take bows out on loan, they borrow them from people that they know that have them. Luckily, people are pretty helpful to each other, at least in my experience, with lending out bows, and because not everyone can afford to have, 4 different bows on hand at all times. Okay, more questions. Is my voice volume okay? Because I'm at cello volume now. I'll move a little closer to the mic to do some of the questions. Okay, Terry asks, now that you moved from the East Coast to LA, have you been able to build a new studio of private students? Would love to learn more about that experience. Yeah, so anyone who has tried to make their living or make a chunk of their living from teaching private lessons probably knows that it is a process. It's definitely not the kind of thing that you can do in a month's time, because just building those connections, finding lasting students, people who are committed to lessons, and just getting your name out there does take some time. I am fairly lucky. In the last 6 months, I have maybe about 7 or 8 students now. Some of them I teach over Skype, which is actually much more successful than I expected it to be before I started teaching Skype lessons. And the rest of them are all local here in LA. It's definitely taken some time. I've done some visits at public schools, kind of like coming in as a guest teacher and running sectionals to help recruit students that way. I've been hired by some community schools to teach lessons through their school, and then just a fair amount of my own sort of online networking, getting my name out there as a teacher, has gotten me some students. And interestingly enough, out here in Los Angeles, there are a lot of adults who like to take cello or are interested in taking cello. So a huge amount of my students currently are actually adults, not kids. But I really enjoy teaching all ages. I've taught from 3 years old to 63 years old. So any age is honestly comfortable for me, and I really enjoy working with adults as well, so it's been a nice change of pace. I had a ton of kid students in Boston, which I really enjoyed also, but different experience than teaching adults. So especially if you're willing to teach kind of any age, that certainly helps when you're trying to recruit students. Okay. How do you monitor yourself when recording duets? Do you use an in-ear headphone? Yes, I do. The way I record myself in the videos where I accompany myself, which plenty of you can probably see, I think the video right when you go to my channel is my Vivaldi video accompanying myself. So I've done a lot of videos this way. The way that I like to do it is I record one part. Usually I record the solo part first because it's a little more demanding and I want a little more flexibility in the solo part. So I'll record the solo part and then I'll get the audio onto my phone, put it in an earbud, run the earbud kind of in the back so you can't really see it, and then I will listen to myself play the solo part, and I will play the continuo along with that. So most people would not have an easy time. Some people like to either see a video or see the audio while they're doing it. I can do it just by ear. I think it's mostly because I've played so much continuo in my life. I'm really used to following and accompanying, so you know, having it in my ear is enough for me, but I think for some people it would be hard. I certainly do not use click tracks. I just do it all by ear, so that's how I do it. Okay. Static in the right speaker, huh? I am not sure what would be causing static. Hopefully I don't do anything that makes a terrible sound. I wonder if it's this. I'm gonna move this. Hopefully that's better. Okay, so I was warming up. I did a C major scale and an E flat major scale. What else should I do? Well, let's talk about what I wanted to play today, which is what I attempted to play in the last stream before it got cut off. So, are we here? Let's see. Yes, Dall'Abaco. So, oh hey Terry, thank you. Terry just donated $5 to the GoFundMe. Thank you, Terry. Here is what I will be playing from. This is Dall'Abaco, for those who are not familiar. I recorded some of these Dall'Abaco capricci on, what was it? Bass Sounds Evolved, my second solo album, which at this point is still a couple years old. If you don't know about my albums, they're up on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere that you listen to music. If you search for Emily Davidson, you will find my cello albums, and also my electronic remix album that I did with my brother, which is all Baroque pieces turned into electronic dance music. So you'll find all my discography on Spotify and iTunes if you want to check it out. One of the things that I recorded in Bass Sounds Evolved were some of these pieces by Dall'Abaco, written for solo cello, and they are really interesting, cool little pieces. They were written around the time of the Bach cello suites, but I think you'll find that stylistically, they're a little bit different. They're maybe not as dense as Bach. They certainly don't use as much chords and double stops, but they're a little bit sweeter because of that. They're a little bit more melodic, a little bit more simple, but technically they still do provide some challenges. But they're really nice pieces, and if you're a cellist, I highly recommend checking them out. So I was going to focus on the first capriccio today, which is in C minor. I would say it's one of the more popular ones, though these are not particularly popular pieces comparative to Bach cello suites. But there's a lot of good technical things to work on in this first one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things as I just kind of go through and practice it naturally. And I'll, of course, still be taking your questions and stopping. It's just going to be a casual practice session. Okay. Okay, are you involved with the church? You could really bless a church by joining their church orchestra. You know, I don't know a lot of churches that actually have orchestras. I've done church services many times in my life. Usually it's like, you know, a special service for a holiday or something, and they're bringing in additional musicians. Those are usually the situations where I play at church. Because I don't know many churches that actually have a full orchestra for every week. Where do I purchase my music? Do you mean sheet music or music to listen to? I'm going to assume you mean sheet music. I have not had to purchase sheet music in a long time because I guess when I was in school, my undergrad and my master's, I bought a ton of music at that time, and that most of those books and supplies have lasted me. Honestly, if you don't know about imslp.org, it is the best website for Baroque music. It has so much of Baroque music is in the public domain, and especially when we're talking about manuscripts and facsimiles, handwritten copies that haven't been transferred over into modern notation by an editor. A lot of those are public domain, and imslp.org has all of them. tons of them, usually multiple ones to choose from for each work. So a lot of my music actually just comes from that website, and it's free, which is really great. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. And that wasn't an ad. I have no affiliation with them. I just use them a lot. Okay. Good. I'm glad you guys are excited about IMSLP. It's a great website. Okay. So let's get into this Dall'Abaco. Let's see. I'm just checking how everything is going with the stream. Looks like everything is fine. If you just joined or you joined in the last few minutes, hello, welcome. Thank you for spending your Saturday with me. I am just going to be practicing, talking, taking your questions, basically just hanging out for the next hour or so. So, Dall'Abaco. Let's get my stand over here. Hopefully audio stuff is still sounding okay. Geraldine asks, hi Emily, thank you for this live stream. How do you avoid tension in the bow arm when playing? And it's funny, someone actually asked the same question earlier this week when I was doing a live stream. So, tension in the bow arm. For me, and that was something I had to work on a lot, not really the whole arm, but I used to have kind of a claw grip on my bow, and it was very hard for me to get any kind of mobility in my hand. And I think that's really what's key to loosening this whole side, is being able to wake up your fingers and get your fingers to be flexible. So, and I kind of talked about this earlier, I don't know if you were here when I was doing my warm-ups, about the difference between an arm stroke and a finger stroke. And especially on gut strings, we really need those finger strokes. So what I would say, for one, you want to avoid any unnecessary bends. For me, I have long arms and long fingers, and typically people with that problem end up having a lot of extraneous bends because they're trying to make room for the long limb. So for me, I had a tendency to have kind of a high wrist, and I had to find that if I moved the position of my elbow, I'd be able to bring my wrist down, and that immediately gets rid of tension. So for one, look for those unnecessary bends. We also tend to hold a lot of tension in our elbow, which you wouldn't think, but because there's a bend there, we often end up flexing this muscle kind of hard. So sometimes thinking about the elbow, and for example, when you're going down into the lower strings, actually physically dropping that elbow, feeling it come close to your side and then come back up again, helps just add some flexibility, because sometimes we just want to keep our elbow at the same level, and then we're trying to do string crossings and we get really tense in here. So allowing, especially if you're doing large string crossings, allowing the elbow to really drop when necessary helps alleviate some of the tension in the elbow. And then in terms of getting the fingers flexible, so it takes a lot of time to train that, but one of the things you can do, and again, I play on my Baroque bow a pinky on top pronated bow hand. Your teacher may teach a different bow hold, but this can apply to any bow hold. You can work on, I forget what they're called, finger ups, like push-ups, but with your fingers. So what you do is you work on just pulling the bow into your hand by collapsing the fingers. So this just gets that feeling of finger flexibility. And you never want the tips of your fingers to change contact point. They shouldn't be moving around the bow. The tips of your fingers should be like sticky pads stuck in place, but the rest of the fingers should be able to be flexible. So you can start working on bow strokes where you, if you do play with a pronated hand like I do, where you sort of track the motion of your hand as you pull the bow stroke, starting actually what we call, I guess, supinated when you go to pull the down bow. So actually exaggerating to pull that way when you go down bow, and then when you go up bow, coming the other way. I'll just show you on an open string. So you can see my hand position has changed a bit now that I'm out here. So just a little bit of finger motion as you track the bow out to different places also adds flexibility. So that's what I would say to start kind of loosening up your right side. And remember that everything is actually coming from the back. We want the energy to flow all the way from basically the shoulder blade through to the tips of the fingers. And every bend and break and tense place that we have cuts off that energy flow from our back. So keeping everything kind of relaxed and supple helps us use the strength of our back as opposed to trying to use every arm muscle. Okay. I love that you guys have so much questions. This is always what happens is I say I'm going to play something and then you guys have so many questions, but I don't mind at all. I'm happy to do these questions. Okay, so have I ever played any instruments besides the cello? So the cello is really my main instrument. I think the first instrument I ever took lessons on was the piano when I was really little, but that did not last very long. I got bored of piano lessons pretty quick, so piano lessons didn't really go anywhere. And then I played guitar informally, not classical guitar. I played Beatles songs and stuff like that before I played the cello. I started guitar when I was maybe 7 years old, really young, and just learned basic chords and played guitar all throughout my teens. But cello I really got serious about when I was about 15 in high school, and then that really became my instrument. I also learned how to play the viola da gamba when I started studying early music, but I don't have an instrument right now, so I can't really practice viola da gamba, but I could play that at a mediocre level. Jeffrey asks, do you think weather is something important in sound quality? I live in a country with temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius or more. Does this affect how a cello sounds? So temperature should actually not be too bad. The only time temperature is a danger to instruments is when you're going from extreme temperatures, so like from really cold to really hot in a short amount of time, makes the wood contract and can damage the instrument that way. But I actually find that humidity has the biggest effect on instruments. If your climate is very dry, it dries the wood. If you're playing on gut strings, it dries the strings. So if you're somewhere that's extremely dry, that can be a little bit hard on the sound quality. Generally, humidity is pretty friendly to wood as long as the humidity isn't excessive either. So it's really going too far in the extremes that can be more damaging on the instrument and then therefore the sound quality. I would see the sound quality as just a result of the condition of the instrument. Okay, next question. Do electric Baroque cellos exist? If so, how do you feel about them? Lastly, how are they generally viewed by younger and older cellists? So right now, an electric Baroque cello does not exist, as far as I know, but I'm pretty certain of that. Because the whole idea around playing on Baroque instruments is really about playing authentically or more accurately, more close to what the instruments were actually like during the time period. So the idea of making an electric Baroque cello kind of defeats the purpose of it being a Baroque cello, I would say. Though I know there are a lot of composers these days who really enjoy the sound of early instruments just for the timbre and the sound. So if that movement were to sort of pick up, I would not be surprised if an electric Baroque cello got invented in 20 years or something. But I think right now the whole Baroque performance practice movement is geared towards doing what was closer to what was going on in the 17th and 18th centuries. All right, guys. So now I'm going to go back to some playing if questions are done for right now. So back to Dall'Abaco. One of the biggest technical issues in this movement are fourth finger trills. Any string player knows fourth finger trills, they're hard. The pinky is a weak finger. To go quickly and to make the pinky finger be independent is no small thing. If you have one pinky trill, fine, but you're going to notice in this piece that we have fourth finger trill after fourth finger trill after fourth finger trill. So it really fatigues that fourth finger and forces you to get used to those trills. So I'm going to work a little bit through focusing in on that to start. Hi Charlie, welcome. You are not that late. I'm probably going to go for another 45 minutes or so. I've been taking questions. I'm about to practice a little bit. So there's our first trill. It's a 4 to a 2, which I think is a little bit easier than a 4 to a 3. Then the next one is a 4 to a 3. Little phrase, and you can see I had a fourth finger trill in every measure pretty much. And for those who are new to Baroque style, we almost always trill from the top note first, and that's typically because trills are sort of about understanding creating dissonance, and oftentimes it's the trill note that is the dissonant note, so we want to hear that dissonance first. This doesn't apply to every single trill, but it's a good blanket rule to start you off, that you would trill from the top note of the trill before you play the main note. And if I were to do an exercise to work on this fourth finger trill, what I do for trill exercises is starting slow and then rapidly increasing. So starting maybe with a quarter note speed of trill, going to an eighth note, going to triplets, going to 16th notes, and so forth. So I'm going to show you what that would look like. It's a really handy trill exercise. Fatigued, but this is what you got to do to work your fourth finger. So I like to go through my trills that way when I'm working on them. Let's see, you guys are already asking more questions, which is great. How long does it typically take for me to learn a new song? Well, it really depends what it is. If I'm playing accompaniment, like continuo for somebody, I can usually sight read and have it at 90% of what performance would be, just when I read it for the first time. If it's a piece of solo repertoire that's really elaborate, it could take a couple months to really learn it and get it down. It totally depends, especially in classical music. There is such a wide range of how difficult repertoire can be, so there's kind of no quick answer. But for easier, more simple things, now that I'm a professional and I've paid my dues in the practice room for my 6 years of higher education, I can learn easier things pretty fast because that's what I'm trained to do. But more complex, serious pieces of repertoire do take a couple months at least. Where did I study Baroque cello? So I got my master's at the Longy School of Music of Bard College, which is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Cambridge, aka Boston, right by Harvard. It's a very small school, only about 200, 250 students, focused mostly on graduate programs. But my teacher, Phoebe Karai, is also the teacher at the Juilliard Historical Performance Program, but she actually does live in Boston, and so that's where I studied with her. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining. Glad you can make it. Okay. So, back to my fourth finger trills. I think I'm going to work through some of the passages now, and I'm going to kind of stop on all of these trills, practice them, warm them up a little bit, and then I'll actually play through the phrase for real. The 4 to 3 is always the hardest. cellist. Really important when you're doing any trill, but especially fourth finger trills, is that the note that you're not trilling, whatever's behind the fourth finger, whether it's a 3 or a 2, is a stable finger, because you don't want to feel like you're trilling with all your fingers. It should really only be the fourth finger, and the rest of the hand is stable. So especially for me, the third finger for everybody can tend to be kind of on the weak side, so my third finger wants to kind of flop out. It's making it harder for me to do the fourth finger trill. So I'm going to address it by trying to stabilize the third finger and then just throwing that fourth finger trill on top of it. Part of why it feels unstable is because another technical issue in this movement is the string crossings. So I'm playing on the G, but then I've got to get right over to the A. Not gonna lie, feels tense. But that's why we practice, to get rid of the tension. Okay. What's the time over here? It is almost 3 p.m. in the afternoon on Saturday. So it is a Saturday afternoon here in Los Angeles. Hi Rose, thanks for joining. I do know William Skeen. I know him as Bill Skeen, but I do know him. He's a wonderful cellist. I've only met him a few times. He plays mostly in San Francisco, but he's awesome. And yes, I've played around on 5-string cellos. I've never had one in my possession for very long, so I haven't been able to learn much repertoire on the 5-string. But yeah, for those who don't know about the 5-string cello, it's a really cool instrument, sometimes called a piccolo cello. It's pretty much decided that Bach wrote his 6th cello suite for a 5-string cello. So if you're curious about the 5-string cello, you should search YouTube for Bach 6th cello suite on a 5-string cello, because it's very cool. I do not know this lute player that you're asking. I have not heard of him. I've never played a cello da spalla either. I've played a gamba, I've played a 5-string, but I've not played a da spalla, but they are such cool instruments. We're getting so many good questions. If any of you guys are not super early music people, but you're seeing the chat, you should definitely Google some of these instruments that we're talking about, because they're so cool, and there are some good videos on YouTube of these instruments. How many schools have I been to? I went to 2 colleges. I went to one school for 4 years of my undergraduate, and then another school for my master's. Okay, let's see. I'm going to try to play a little bit more, because I am going to be ending the stream in probably about half an hour, so I would definitely want to get some playing in, but feel free, again, to ask questions whenever you have them, and I'll get to them when I stop playing. Oh, JamWow, thank you so much for the $20 donation. Shout out JamWow. Thank you so much, guys. The donations are so generous. I really appreciate it. All right, so let's do this Capricci from Dall'Abaco. Maybe I'll play up to the first repeat sign, start getting into it a little bit more musically now that I've kind of practiced the trills. And one thing that I'm undecided about on this movement is the bowing, because I used to, when I recorded this movement, I did a bowing that had a bit more slurs that made for a longer line, but I could do some of those slurs separated out. It gives kind of a different feel. So I'm undecided about bowing, so I might kind of mess around with that. I want to do that again. And you know what I'm actually going to do? Before I actually try to play this through, I'm going to do some double stop practice, because if you don't know, you can't tell, this is in C minor, 3 flats, not the friendliest key on cello, because we lose our open A string and we're playing a lot of notes that don't resonate as much with the flats. So it's helpful to do some double stop exercises to get the left hand really outlined in the key. So I think before I actually try to play this through again, I'm going to do some of that. C string. Okay, and hopefully, I know I'm not really giving you guys a concert performance, I'm just kind of practicing and messing around, but hopefully the kind of stuff that I'm doing and the way that I'm working on the piece gives you some inspiration for your own practice, some things to try. That's kind of my aim for doing these live practice sessions. So I'll show you how I would do the double stop practice for this. Getting this B flat. And if you can't tell, if you're a cellist, maybe you're noticing this stuff. If you're just listening, maybe you're not. But I have to change positions for each measure because of the notes that follow. I'm doing each measure in a different position. But because of that, one of the things that I'm having trouble with right at this moment is my shift from third position where I start to second position when I move from a C to a B flat. And now granted, I'm not playing the C and the B flat back to back. I'm moving over to the A string and then have to find the B flat. But what I can do to kind of learn that territory is just go between that C and B flat until I feel like I really know exactly what size that shift is. Okay, so there's the core of the shift. Now I'm going to practice doing it with all the other notes that come with it. So really the shift is from this high F to the low B flat, which is a pretty large shift. It's across 2 strings and it's in different positions. So I really like practicing shifts by isolating the shift, really just going between those 2 notes until it feels a little more comfortable. Gonna check in with you guys in the chat because you guys are nice and chatty today, which I love. What do I think about classical guitar? I love classical guitar. You know, I have never had any friends who play classical guitar, so I never really got to know the instrument and the repertoire on a very intimate level. I mostly just heard it at, you know, school recitals and things like that, concerts occasionally. So I never came to know classical guitar that well. I'm a little bit more familiar with lute and theorbo because of the Baroque repertoire. And I love the theorbo. If you guys don't know about the theorbo, it's an incredible guitar-like instrument. How many years have I played the cello? Well, I started the cello in my public school when I was about 8 years old. So that would put me at about 21 years of playing the cello. But when I was playing in elementary school and in middle school as a kid, I was not taking any private lessons. I was just playing in my school's orchestra, which met once a week. I didn't have individualized instruction, so I don't really count those years. I did have a cello in my hands during that time, but I wasn't really learning much on the cello. I didn't start taking private lessons until I was about 15, and then I got really serious. So I really say that I played cello, I've been playing maybe 13-ish, 14 years now. Do I ever use my thumb? So that's referring to thumb position. We don't see thumb position as much on Baroque cello, but as we get towards the end of the Baroque period and into early classical, thumb position does come more into use, and especially if we're playing classical concertos or something like that. Alternate fingerings where we're using the thumb in the lower positions is definitely less common in the Baroque repertoire because most things are made to be able to play comfortably in first position. But thumb position did exist in the Baroque. It just was not nearly as prevalent as it is in later repertoire. I do not know Dimitri, unfortunately. Okay. So what was I doing? I just did my double stop practice. So I'm going to do that once more, and then I'm going to try to actually play through the A section of this. Let's make sure I'm still good. What I just did, and that I definitely recommend if you tune with your pegs as opposed to your fine tuners, is I just checked my bridge to make sure that it was still completely perpendicular to the body of the cello, because with a lot of peg tuning, the bridge will start to get pulled that way. So every now and then I just kind of push down gently on the bridge and it'll click right back into place if it started to shift a bit. And I find it actually really helps the sound of the instrument to do that regularly. But it will make your strings go a little out of tune. How long did it take you to get used to the 4/15 tuning when I first started? So I do not have perfect pitch, which actually does come in handy because I know people with perfect pitch do struggle if they have to suddenly start playing at 4/15 because then A sounds like a G sharp and it becomes this whole issue. For me, I adjusted to it really quickly, even to playing into temperaments, which I would argue playing in temperaments versus equal temperament is a harder adjustment than just playing at 4/15. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, equal temperament is basically the way modern tuning is established today, the way a grand piano would be tuned, which is that every single half step is the exact same distance of cents. But that is actually not how things were tuned. In the earlier days, things were tuned for what we call pure thirds, basically things that affect the overtones that make the sound actually ring more. And what it typically means in a digestible way is that your major thirds are lower than equal temperament and your minor thirds are higher. And it's all about creating resonance. If you play a string instrument, you can use open strings to sort of listen for that resonance. And, you know, a lot of people who are used to and very used to equal temperament hear period instrument playing and think it's horrendously out of tune, and it's usually just a different tuning system that may sound a little bit different. So that takes some adjusting as well. But if you're playing with a harpsichord or an instrument that's been precisely tuned to whatever temperament you're playing in. That certainly helps because it gives you something to match to. It gives you some context for the temperament, as opposed to just kind of loosely trying to play in a temperament that you're not familiar with. And Richard asks that I use Baroque cello for Mozart, and yes, I do, because the actual instruments themselves were not changing drastically in Mozart's time. The bows were certainly changing, but the instruments were still strung with gut. Maybe the cello started to have a short wooden end pin. That's possible, but they certainly weren't the big steel string modern instruments that we know today. So I find that my Baroque cello works really nicely for Mozart. I used my Baroque cello for Beethoven, but it was early Beethoven and I was using a modern bow, so it was a combination. But gut strings were used on instruments up until the 1920s, roughly. Some of the really early classical recordings that we still have were actually on gut strings. So gut strings are not really Baroque specific, actually. They've been around far beyond the Baroque period. Hi Fabio, thanks for stopping by. Alrighty. Where was I? A little bit more double stop practice to try to get some in tune playing, and then I'll actually play the passage. Am I in tune? Nope. This is why we practice. Day, but we all have our days. Okay. Why am I tuning perfect fifths? I don't think that I am strings are not staying in tune much at all today, but I don't aim for I mean, we want perfect fifths to an extent, but I think if I were to take actual equal temperament notes from a tuner, my fifths would likely be more wide than equal. But I, to be honest, focus more on actual left hand, how I'm tuning my thirds. Because I find tuning with pegs on a big instrument, sometimes your fifths just want to be somewhere on a certain day based on how your instrument is settling. So I try not to get too crazy about my fifths, somewhere within a range of a perfect fifth, so long as it rings true and sounds right. finally getting in tune. The second Dall'Abaco in G minor is beautiful, but really difficult. Yeah, I have never played the second one. The ones that I recorded for Bass Sounds Evolved were the first, the 7th and the 8th, and the 3rd, which is my total favorite. I should have played the 3rd today. I just love that one, but it's in the same key, so if I'm not having a friendly day with flats, it would have applied to either one. Okay. Well, even though I'm not feeling super warmed up and great since I've been going back and forth between the questions, I'm still going to play the A section of this, because why not? You guys deserve to hear a little bit of music after all this kind of mundane practicing. So I did a different bowing that time. I did my separated bowing, and it's amazing how just changing the bowing already makes you want to phrase everything completely differently. When I do the separated bowing that way, I really want to play everything a lot lighter. I want to do the trills faster, as you probably heard. But when I used to do a more slurred bowing, it made me want to kind of elongate everything, do a slower trill. Sorry guys, I am playing so out of tune today, I'm not even going to act like I'm not noticing. Of course I'm noticing, but we all have our days. You know, people ask me all the time about buying Baroque bows, and because the only Baroque bow I've ever owned is this one, I bought it from the guy I bought my cello from, but basically from the maker, Christopher English. I don't have a lot of experience with the inexpensive bows you can buy online, but I do know Johnson String, so that's johnsonstring.com. I believe they have one model of a Baroque bow that's fairly inexpensive, under $200. Shar Music, S-H-A-R, I think they have a model of an inexpensive Baroque bow. And if you're not ready to pay, you know, professional bow price, like this was probably, might have been $1,200 when I got it, but these days bows get up there even more expensive. If you're not ready to drop that kind of money on a bow, definitely try the more inexpensive ones just to give you a feel. Hey guys, thanks for joining. Though the stream is wrapping up pretty soon, but I'm trying to take as many questions as I can. Let's just say, let's just kind of recap for people who have joined the stream later. I recently announced a new Collaborator program where I'm expanding my channel to include some other musicians who also play Baroque music and early classical music, especially those who play on period instruments. So I have a new submission process if you want to be featured on my channel, and all the details about that are in the description of the video. There's a link. You can just go to emilyplayscello.com/collaborators to learn more. And I did record a video talking about that program also, if you want to just hear me talk about the whole deal with that. So that's on my channel. You should be able to find that video pretty easily. So looking for collaborators on my channel. Other than that, I'm trying to do monthly live streams. I love to do these streams and just talk to you guys and answer questions and play kind of casually. So I'm trying to do these live streams, you know, once a month if I can. All of my videos that I put out on YouTube are supported by Patreon. So if you're a really big fan of the channel and you're already subscribed and you want to actually be a part of really helping the channel grow, you should definitely look into Patreon and becoming a supporter that way. There's a link to that in the description. And then if you're just enjoying the stream, there's a GoFundMe if you want to leave a little tip for your time here. All right, Michael, thanks for stopping by. Have a good night. Okay, Bufar, am I saying that right? I was already asked how long I've been playing the cello, and basically my story is that I started in elementary school at my public school, but I didn't really learn anything. I had no one-on-one instruction. I just played once a week at school, so I don't really count those years in elementary and middle school because I was kind of learning the cello, but kind of not. I started private lessons when I was 15, which is actually pretty late because I'm young for my grade already, so I was taking my college auditions when I was 16, and I had only been taking lessons for about a year and a half. And I remember being in line to go into my audition room and talking to other people who were auditioning, and they had been taking private lessons for 10 years. And I had been taking private lessons for 1 year, and I was taking the same audition as them. So it's very stressful. I definitely get being a late starter. Doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means you gotta work a lot harder. And if you're curious more about my story, I do have videos on my channel where I talk all about, at length, my whole experience in college and what that was like for me and how I was able to get started with my career. So if you're thinking about those kinds of things, definitely check out the videos on my channel because I do talk a lot about those topics. Johnny Cash, that's a bit outside of my expertise. Thank you, Richard. He says, I really enjoy your videos. I would love to have a harpsichord player on my channel, Dario, so please feel free to apply. I really have to take all the submissions through the official form so that I can keep everything organized, but especially if you have a good way to record yourself on harpsichord, I would definitely love to hear what you're up to, so be sure to apply. And organ too, any historical instrument's great. You know, video quality is gonna matter, audio quality, I can help a little bit with audio quality. So all of those are factors as well, but please do apply if you play any kind of historical instrument, especially if the repertoire is Baroque or classical. Okay. Geraldine says, do you feel that the pegs are slipping? Do you use chalk? You know, I've never used any kind of compound on my pegs because if you play a Baroque instrument and you have to learn to tune with pegs, you kind of learn all the tricks because you can't really get around it. You have to be tuning constantly with these things. So I find the thing that makes the biggest difference with the pegs, assuming they're in good working order, they don't have any damage or anything like that, is how the string is wrapped inside the peg box is what affects if it either slips or if it sticks. Basically, let's see if I can show this on the camera. Can I? Let's see. Oh, you can actually kind of see in there. All right, so, am I getting this right? How close the string is wrapped to the peg box affects that. So if the string is wrapped really, really tight, really close next to the peg box, it's likely going to be hard to turn the peg. If it's wrapped a little bit further and there's a decent amount of space in between the string wrapping and the peg box, that's more likely to slip. So basically the best thing you can do is rewrap your string so there's just the right amount of a tiny bit of space before the peg box, but not too much. Okay. Can you start learning an instrument in college? Absolutely. I mean, you know, the later you learn, if you're looking to be a professional by the time you're in your 20s and you start an instrument in college, that doesn't give you very much time to learn. Even though I started getting serious about cello in high school, which is late, if you think about it, if I started when I was 15 and we're not really professionals in anything until about 25, I still had 10 years to really practice hard, which I did, and go to a ton of school, which I did. So you do need time. You know, things cannot be done overnight, but if you have a decent amount of time, a couple years, and you work really hard and you have the right guidance, you can achieve a lot. Okay. Why don't I like romantic music? Romantic music just isn't really for me. I'm not going to say I don't like any of it. Of course, you know, I had to love classical music in order to choose to do it for a career and choose to study it as much as I did. So I love all classical music. I mean, and I've been exposed to a ton of it, listened to tons of pieces, taken tons of classes, so I'm not going to make any huge broad statements that I don't like romantic or contemporary music. I just found when I was in college that the louder, big symphonic works that are much more common in the romantic and more contemporary eras just weren't for me. I liked a smaller, more intimate, more personal setup, and all of Baroque music is essentially chamber music, except for some of the big, big works. Always working with smaller groups, more soloists, more individuals, and that was just more for me. And I also liked just the style of the music spoke to me more so than romantic did. All right, I can tell already that I'm just going to do questions until the end. So I'm going to turn this back up to a better vocal volume. Hopefully I don't get too loud. Okay, you guys hopefully still hearing me okay. Okay. How do you feel about playing the best instrument in the orchestra? Everyone wants to play the cello. It's true. What I find about playing the cello is, a lot of times I have to tell people what I do for my job or, stuff like that. And every time I say I play the cello, people are always, oh, wow, I love the cello. That's amazing. I didn't realize cello was such a loved instrument until I was doing it professionally. And then I realized, wow, a lot of people really like the cello. So the collaborations right now, what I'm looking for the Collaborator program is going to be solo repertoire that you've recorded yourself. So I'm not going to be doing any of the recording, and I won't necessarily be playing with people right now. I'm trying to start this Collaborator program simple at first, and if it goes well, I may elaborate into more complex collaborations where I'm involved also. But right now what I want to do is basically treat it as like a spotlight where I feature other musicians who are doing things that are in line with what I do on my channel. And if you have your own YouTube channel or Instagram, Facebook page, whatever kind of social media you have, this will hopefully be an opportunity to direct some traffic at all of your pages, because I want to be just expanding this community of people doing classical music online. So that's sort of the goal of featuring people on my channel. Do I recommend any pieces by Telemann? So Telemann didn't write any solo cello music, which is sad because I really like Telemann. I love his flute sonatas, and the continuo parts sit really nicely on cello. So if you play the cello and you know a flute player, you can play Telemann flute sonatas like duets, so long as you get a part that isn't piano accompaniment with two hands, but that is actually just a bass line, and then you can play it on cello. It sounds great. Also, Telemann wrote some really beautiful solo fantasias for violin. And there is a transcription for cello that I have, but I have no idea where it came from. I mean, I got it as a photocopy from a teacher, so I don't know what the edition is. I don't know how to find it, which is really sad. But maybe keep your eye out if you play the cello for the Telemann violin fantasias arranged for cello, because those are really nice too. You're right, Richard, you are right. I think Telemann wrote one sonata for cello and continuo, and I'm glad you said that because I'm pretty sure I recorded one of the movements on my channel. Yes, I did, and it's beautiful. It's D major. Yeah, I should learn that whole sonata because that is such a nice piece, so thank you for reminding me. Okay. The difference between chamber music and orchestra music. Chamber music is considered to be smaller ensembles, typically like less than 20 or 25 people. Like a small string orchestra could be considered chamber music, but usually chamber music means a string quartet, a piano trio, a duet. Chamber music is smaller ensembles than an orchestra. Okay, so my instrument is not an actual Baroque cello. It was built a modern cello in, I think it was the 1950s. Can I see in here? 1957. The maker is Roth, R-O-T-H, German-made instrument. And again, built a modern cello. And then about 25 years ago, it was converted to a partial Baroque setup. So I did buy it with the short fingerboard, the tailpiece, the Baroque bridge, the lack of end pin, because it was used by another Baroque cellist when I got it. Maybe, when was that? More than 5 years ago. 7 or 8 years ago I got this instrument. And then my bow is an African Blackwood bow by Christopher English, and I love this bow. I just think Chris English makes really great bows. So that is my setup. And my strings are made by Damien. If you guys don't know about Damien strings, I'm pretty sure I put the link in the description. I put his link in all my descriptions because I always use his strings. I've been using his gut strings since I started playing Baroque cello. I love them. They're the best. And he's really good. You know, he makes all the strings himself. He's really helpful if you're new to gut strings and you have a question about which gauge to buy and so on. He's really great. So if you're thinking about trying gut strings, which by the way you can do on your modern instrument, you can just string it with gut, definitely check out Damien. His website, damienstrings.com, is in the description. Did I have to learn piano in college? Gideon asks. Yes, I did, and it was not fun. But it wasn't fun for most people. Piano class, I think, is one of the funniest experiences that I had in college, because you get a bunch of music majors who are really, really good at their instrument because they're there, you know, majoring in music performance on their instrument. But then they have to play piano, which they don't really play in a class environment in front of other people, and everybody gets so self-conscious because they're used to being good, and everyone's like playing beginner piano kind of badly. So that was me in piano class. I think I had to do 4 semesters, so 2 years of piano, and it was hard. I didn't love it, but it was necessary and good. I can't say I retained everything that I learned, but it was a good experience. And then in my master's, I had to take a figured bass class and actually play full continuo, realized continuo, reading figures on the harpsichord. And that was really difficult, especially because my piano skills were already kind of lackluster. But it was an amazing experience, really cool to do. If I had a harpsichord of my own, I would totally try to brush off those skills because it's such a cool thing to do. Okay, guys, so I was going to end at 3:30 my time, which is in 3 minutes. So if you guys have any other lingering questions, get them in now because I'm going to end promptly at 3:30. But I so appreciate you guys hanging out, especially those who donated. Thank you guys so much. If you guys are still thinking about throwing me a donation, you can do it one time at the GoFundMe, or if you want to become a more serious supporter to the channel, you can join my Patreon, which there's a link to in the description. Clavichord or harpsichord, what do you prefer listening to? Clavichord is an interesting novelty. For those who don't know, a clavichord, it's not quite a harpsichord, it's not quite a piano, it's another historical keyboard instrument. It's very quiet. I think I love the harpsichord, to be honest. It's one of my favorite instruments, so nothing really trumps the harpsichord, but the clavichord is really wonderful for certain types of repertoire. And I don't want to misspeak because I'm not a keyboard player, so I don't want to be wrong. But I feel like clavichord is used for that sort of, what is it called? This is how you know I've been out of school too many years. Like all the historical information is buried way deep in the back of my brain. But I want to say like Bach's Sons, the sort of end of the Baroque transitioning into the early classical period. There's a lot of great repertoire then for the clavichord that's really interesting and I think sounds great on a clavichord. But if I had to just pick one by default, I'd probably choose the harpsichord. Bufar, I don't understand your question. What can your channel help with? What do you mean? Oh, forte piano is good for Mozart. I could definitely agree with that. All right, I am going to set my cello down because we are going to go offline very shortly. Good recommendation for a piece for my exam in musicology. Played for 4.5 years. Do you mean, Mads, do you mean a solo piece for cello? A piece for your exam? Oh, so like a piece, I would imagine if it's musicology, it's something that you're going to analyze, yeah? A really cool, I think the Bach cello suites, anything Bach is great to analyze. It may be a little bit stereotypical, obvious choice because so many people study Bach, but that's for a reason. There's a lot to see and a lot to discover in Bach. And Bach cello suites are really cool to analyze because they're written for one solo instrument, but when you break them apart, you can actually see how he is writing multiple parts, a bass, a middle, a treble, within one part. So doing that analysis is super informative for the cello suites. But really just, I would say, pick a piece you love, something that really intrigues you and interests you. You know, if you're going to be studying it that in depth, you should love it yourself. Oh, it's something that you're going to play. What you can explore on cello, if you're already, Bach cello suites are a little too familiar for you, are the Gemignani or the Barriere sonatas for cello are really, really great Baroque repertoire. Gemignani wrote one set of cello sonatas, and Barriere wrote 4 books of them, so there's tons of Barriere. But I mentioned imslp.org earlier in the stream, but that's a great resource for sheet music, so you should look there first if you want to try out some pieces. And then, Mads, I don't know when you tuned in, but some other interesting pieces you could do that I was playing earlier today are these Dall'Abaco capricci. It's a little hard to find the sheet music for them. You know, I've gotten a lot of questions. Some editions have gone out of print, but these are really good too. Also, Degli Antoni, if you like 17th century. Basically, if you're looking for solo cello repertoire, go check out my old albums, Bass Sounds and Bass Sounds Evolved. They're on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere if you just search Emily Davidson or if you search Bass Sounds. But that's all solo cello music, so that'll kind of give you some ideas for some more obscure repertoire if that's what you're looking for. Okay, sorry guys, I'm starting to talk faster and faster because I gotta wrap up. Justin, thank you so much for tuning in. Yeah, you guys are awesome. I had so much fun. I didn't get to do that much playing, but that's still great. I love getting to answer your questions and just interact with you guys. So, if you're not subscribed to my channel, that's definitely important to do. So make sure you're subscribed because YouTube is supposed to email you when I go live. So if you don't catch it, you'll know. But I do tend to announce my live streams on my Instagram page and on my Facebook page. You can find me everywhere with Emily Plays Cello on any platform. The last one, Mads, is Degli Antoni, A-N-T-O-N-I-I. So I would, but like I said, just go find my albums because then you'll see all the names with everything written out. And those are pretty obscure, so they're kind of hard to find recordings of. So just go look up Emily Davidson or Bass Sounds and you'll find the list of all the repertoire. Oh, hey, Bad Resistor, thanks for stopping by. What was I saying? Subscribe to the channel, and that's how you'll know for sure that I'm going live. And then I'm trying to do these live streams once a month if I can, and then produced videos, you know, still on a regular basis. And hopefully some new collaborators too. So if you're interested in the Collaborator program and being featured on my channel, again, priority really goes to Baroque music and period instruments, but I'll try to include things that I still feel are relevant. You can learn more about the Collaborator program with the link in the description. Okay guys, so I gotta get going for now, but if I didn't get to your question, be sure to tune in next time because I always take questions on the live stream. Thanks for hanging out. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever time it is that you are, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.